Lights, camera, action. Welcome and thank you for joining us at the 29th Annual Virginia Festival of Jewish Film, presented by Alma Howard Laderberg of blessed memory. I'm William Laderberg. I'm co-chair of the screening committee for the festival. Our festival is one of the longest running Jewish film festivals in the country, and that's something we're very proud of. First of all, let me say that you cannot have a film festival without the films. We've been able to show terrific films and the programs that surround them for 29 glorious years because of the amazing and generous support of our patrons, sponsors, and partners who make certain we have the funds to do just that. Mark Robbins and I also want to thank the members of our screening committee for their dedicated and enthusiastic service to the festival. Also, thanks to Tom, Tench, Teresa, and Olivia for once again hosting our festival. We appreciate the NARO's support. This evening is dedicated to former film critic Mal Vincent, my good friend and a longtime friend of our festival. For many years, Mal has picked a Hollywood movie with Jewish themes for our festival. He talked about each movie and warmed us with stories and gossip about his Hollywood connections. Unfortunately, Hester Street is Mal's last pick. Mal's passing last year is deeply felt by all of us tonight. We are especially grateful to longtime friends of Mal who wish to remain anonymous for sponsoring Hester Street tonight. Now, before we begin, I'd like to welcome Rabbi Michael Panitz, who will introduce Hester Street. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, William. Shalom. Good evening to everyone. I'm conscious of trying to fill unfillable shoes right now, being the first not Mal Vincent to take that slot. So join me in a moment of reverential silence to honor his memory. As we say in our Hebrew language of prayer, Yehi Zichro Baruch, may his memory endure as a blessing. Amen. If I were Mal, I could probably say something like, well, when I was backstage with Carol Kane. I can't do that. I'm also not going to tell you much about the plot of Hester Street because for various reasons, all of these remarks are going to be before the film, not after the film, and I don't want to give anything away. But I will tell you a little bit about the place of Hester Street in the trajectory of Jewish identity. The film was from 1975, but the story of the film goes back to the 1890s. The book, or in this case, the long short story of the film, it's about 70 pages or so long, was written by Abraham Kahn, the longtime and even legendary editor of Der Vorwärts, the flagship Jewish Yiddish newspaper. Kahn was a very interesting fellow. He was a socialist. He cared deeply about the Jewish working man and working woman, and you'll see aspects of that in the story as well. He wanted his newspaper to speak to what the common folk wanted to know when they weren't busy toiling at their work. And he actually had some controversy with the financial backers of the newspaper. He actually resigned as editor once or twice, but eventually he prevailed and became one of the landmarks of that generation of Jews in America. His most famous part of Der Vorwärts was his advice column. Before there was Dear Abby, there was the Bintel brief, where people would ask the editor their questions of how to make it as a stranger in a strange land. And he became the mentor to a generation. Now, the story that he wrote, which is called Jekyll, is about people trying to make it in America. So I want to teach you two terms that we learned from sociologists. And the terms sound like synonyms, but they're not. The one term is assimilation. You probably know that word, assimilation. The other word is acculturation. You may not have heard that as much, acculturation. But I'll tell you in a simple image, what's the difference? Assimilation is a fondue, and acculturation is a tossed salad. Right? In a fondue, the various elements melt down. They lose their identity. In a tossed salad, you can tell where the cucumber ends and where the tomato begins. And where the red pepper doesn't have to apologize for being spicier than the mainstream. So the big question, and this really is the big question for Jews in America, is do we aspire to the fondue or do we aspire to the tossed salad? When I read the story and when I watch the film, as I've done many times and always with great enjoyment, I see that tension playing out. Again, I'm not going to give away the plot, but you'll see one character who just wants to be an American, or as he might have said it in his accent, a Yankee. And you're going to see another character who's at a certain point going to say, a klug zu Columbusen, goddamn Columbus, for having discovered America. And you're going to see someone who's going to say, when you come to America, you say, goodbye, Lord. But at the end of it, we're going to see that life, although the movie is shot in black and white, life is not black and white. Life is many, many beautiful shades of gray. And the movie portrays several of these. Now, a word about the woman who brought the movie to life. Joan Micklin Silver, a name you should know. Passed away not long ago. She passed away at the very end of 2020. You may know her best for her marvelous film, Crossing Delancey, from 1988. Just a quick show of hands. Who's seen Crossing Delancey? Right? You never eat pickles the same way afterwards. She actually had a career before she went into movies. She was married, by the way, to Raphael Silver, the son of Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver, leading rabbi in the Midwest in the mid-20th century. They lived in Cleveland. She taught music. She wrote and directed plays. When she came to New York City in 1967 is when she began her film career. She wrote for the Village Voice, and she began writing scripts for children's educational films. Some of them you may have heard of. The Case of the Elevator Duck. I don't know if you've heard that one, but also, and this is probably critical for Hester Street, she also wrote the script for The Immigrant Experience, The Long, Long Journey, which was about Polish immigrants to America. Now, I want to talk to you for a minute about the place of this very film in a story which is still unfolding. And that is the story of the revival of Yiddish in America. Today, we are in a better place than we were 50 years ago. 50 years ago, Yiddish was simply a dying language outside of fervently Orthodox circles, which chose Yiddish because they resisted both acculturation and assimilation. And so they simply wanted to have a kind of a linguistic segregation. Apart from that sub-community, which still exists in places like Kiryas Yoel in Rockland County, New York, and parts of Brooklyn. But apart from that, Yiddish had fewer and fewer and fewer speakers. People were throwing books out. Newspapers were shutting down, and so on and so forth. It began to turn around in the 1960s and 1970s. Think of the success of Fiddler on the Roof. In its day, it had the longest run on Broadway up to that point. Now, Fiddler doesn't give you a lot of Yiddish, but it gives you the schmeck of Yiddish, right? But a half decade after that, you have a very important book. Some of you have it, I bet most of you have it on your shelves. And that is the Jewish Catalog. Remember the Jewish Catalog? With its funky line drawings and its countercultural images. Remember what the people looked like? The women wore peasant blouses. The men wore unstarched shirts. Their hair was benignly neglected rather than brill creamed. Right? And that, of course, was an act of rebellion. Remember the musical Hair from 1967? That's more or less the time of the Jewish Catalog. If you go through the pages of the Jewish Catalog, you will see Yiddish in places where you wouldn't have expected it. And it's presented not as an object of Borscht Belt shtick. It's not simply people being embarrassed by the broken accents of their immigrant parents. Now it's people saying, these are my grandparents, and they're authentic. Or to use the word from the 1960s, they're not plastic, they're authentic. So this desire for authenticity on the part of a rising new generation meant that people were willing to give the language of their grandparents a more respectful hearing. They weren't learning it yet, although there are today many, many programs for learning Yiddish. And of course, there's a tremendous revival of Yiddish music, klezmer music, which also started in the 1970s. But this very film was one of the landmarks in the portrayal of immigrant life in the language of the immigrants. And it does so beautifully. Of course, you do hear the English, which is almost comical at various times, but the Yiddish is a language of love and life and loss and learning, and something very, very beautiful. So this very film is an important moment in a journey which is continuing. I'll stop here because I want you to get to the film. If you haven't seen it yet, you're in for a wonderful treat. Enjoy, enjoy, enjoy.